Hey, good afternoon to you. It is 4:07 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Congresswoman Ashley Hinson from Iowa joins us at 4:30. She questioned D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser and company today about the affairs of the district. We'll chat with her about what she learned. And then Bobby Burak is here from Outkick at 5 o'clock. We discuss the left's fascination with adulation of the apparent assassin of that United Healthcare CEO. Bobby Burak reacts here at 5 o'clock. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. We are watching with a lot of confusion and fascination as drones are hovering over the United States of America. Remember, a Chinese spy balloon floated clean across the country and received a lot of aggressive media coverage. The whole country wanted to know, why the hell is that happening? And it wasn't shot down until it was over the Atlantic Ocean. Mission achieved, and then the Biden administration just waited until it was not spying on anything of value, and then they shot it down. And now we have drones floating over regions, especially of northern New Jersey. Listen to an ABC News report from this morning.
Mystery in the sky now. Drones sighted all over the Northeast. The FBI is asking the public for help. Janae Norman is in Kennett Square, Pennsylvania, with that story for us. Good morning, Janae.
Hey, Robin. Good morning to you. Yeah, I'm here in Kennett Square because we've got a lot of fun coming up in our next hour regarding Christmas. But first, this story, it's making big news up where I live in North Jersey, Essex, Morris, Monmouth counties, where people are talking about this as far reported as Connecticut, all the way down here to the Philadelphia area, these drone sightings. And we are not talking about small toy-like drones that people would use for hobbies, but commercial grade drones, reportedly some the size of a small school bus or a small airplane. And neighbors are reportedly seeing these drones flying at night or in the early morning hours in flocks and at low altitudes.
So small school buses are flying over American towns. We don't have answers. Here's the governor of New Jersey yesterday.
What can you tell us? What is going on, and why is it taking so long to come up with an explanation?
Yeah, it's a good, I don't blame people for being frustrated. Let me say, most importantly, right up front, we see no evidence, and I say we, this includes Homeland Security, FBI, Secret Service, our state police, authorities at all levels of government. The most important point to say is we don't see any concern for public safety.
They don't see any concern for public safety. Well, first of all, how can you say that if you don't know anything about them? Phil Murphy continued.
These are apparently very, as I understand it, very sophisticated. The minute you get eyes on them, they go dark.
What?
And, you know, we're obviously most concerned about sensitive targets and sensitive critical infrastructure. So we've got military assets, we've got utility assets, we've got the president-elect's one of his homes here.
But we have no concerns about safety? What is going on? For more on this, I want to bring in a guest whose town is being affected by it. He's a New Jersey assemblyman, that is, by the name of Mike Inganamort. He represents New Jersey's 24th district, and he joins us now. Sir, good to have you with us.
Great to be on, Vince.
Now, I should also emphasize that Corey. Now, this is what Corey wrote on my paper. Okay, he wrote that you are his less impressive brother. Now, I didn't say that. He wrote that on this paper, so that's a part of your title, apparently.
Well, listen, Vince, because your show does not reach into my district, I'll agree with him just this one time. How about that?
All right, fair enough. Hey, so what is this? What is happening to your town right now? Just describe what you're seeing.
Sure. Well, I'll paint a picture for you, Vince. I mean, basically, for the past 3 weeks, literally 3 weeks, New Jerseyans in the district I represent, in the town where I live, Chester, New Jersey, in the northwest part of the state, we have gone out at night, we've looked up into the sky, and we see anywhere from 1 to 12 drones buzzing through our neighborhoods every single night. Last night, the night before, and I'll bet you tonight, we're maybe 2 hours away from seeing them reappear tonight, if I had to guess. And because this has been going on night after night, week after week, we're up to week 3 on this. You can imagine the phone is ringing off the hook at the police station, in the mayor's office, in my legislative office. There are concerned residents, I'm one of them, asking what the heck is going on. And as of tonight, Vince, you heard those clips that you just played. We have not gotten any answers, no answers whatsoever.
But the feds, somebody within the federal government has to know what this is. I feel like we're being lied to at a massive scale because the FBI is asking for tips. They say, oh, call the tip line. Let us know. But there
Yeah.
doesn't seem to be a sense of urgency from any level of government to take these drones out of the sky, given that, they're the size of. Have you ever heard of the drones the size of school buses hovering over American towns?
I have never heard of it until now. The reality here is stranger than the fiction. So you're absolutely right. I don't see that urgency. There's a lot of urgency coming out of my office and the mayors and police departments and constituents I talk to who want answers, but it's falling on deaf ears, and you're seeing a very passive response from Governor Murphy, his administration, and the federal government as well, Vince. I mean, they're saying there's no cause for concern, but please call the FBI. How do those two things go together? Don't worry about it, but please call the country's Federal Bureau of Investigation.
I mean, the same is true of Governor Murphy. So I just played this clip of him saying that the public needs to know that there is no threat or there should be no concern for public safety. And then simultaneously he says, but we're very worried that these drones are flying over military bases and near the residence of the incoming president of the United States. I don't actually see how those two statements work in concert.
They do not. They do not. And he's zeroing in on an important point here. I'll give him that. Where I live in this part of Northwest New Jersey, the district I represent, we are sandwiched in between two critical national security assets. Picatinny Arsenal, which is worth a Google later on for your listeners, which is a military base in Northwest New Jersey that provides all of the ammunition for America's military. Talk about a critical asset. On the other side of our district, we have, as you probably know, President Trump's golf course, Trump National in Bedminster. For a long time, the first week when these drones appeared, they were primarily corralled between those two locations. And frankly, we just made an assumption that it had something to do with it. Now that these drones are being spotted all the way down at the Jersey Shore, they're going all the way up to the Pennsylvania-New York border. We're talking total coverage across the entirety of the state of New Jersey.
Yes.
No answers, but call the FBI.
So you said in your town you're seeing anywhere between 1 to a dozen drones every single evening. What are they doing? Are they just sitting in a holding pattern? Do they land? Do they come down to the earth? What are they doing?
Well, they have not been landing. They have not been coming down to the earth. We wish they were, because then we might be able to identify them and understand what the heck is going on here.
Yeah.
Vince, there's really no rhyme or reason to it. They spin around, they move here, they move there, they're stationary for a bit. Occasionally they'll line up in a perfect line, which is interesting to observe. And there were some theories out there that it might have something to do with Elon Musk's Starlink. I think that's been ruled out by the armchair pundits who think that those, satellites and other technology are far higher up in, into the outer reaches of the atmosphere. There's no rhyme or reason to it. They zip around our neighborhoods. They come and they go. The only thing that is certain about them is that they appear every night around 6:30, 7 o'clock.
I mean, do they pose a risk in the airspace to any other air traffic? And the FAA, I keep hearing that they've imposed flight restrictions on this airspace, and yet you're still seeing dozens of drones each night? Oh, he just dropped? Okay. All right, well, we'll get him back in just a moment. We're speaking to, as I pointed out, that's Corey and Ganamort's brother, but important for today, he's an assemblyman who represents the 24th District in New Jersey. That's an area of northern New Jersey, Mike and Ganamort, and he says they're seeing each night in his neighborhood anywhere between 1 to a dozen of these drones. The reports, as we've been discussing, are that the drones are as big as SUVs or small school buses. And as Mike was just telling us, occasionally they will pull together into a formation. They'll all just line up, and you've got citizens looking up at the sky, wondering with each passing night, what are these? Who's responsible for them? And when am I going to finally get some answers? Mike, we've got you back with us now. Why don't we have any clear images of these things? I've seen a lot of cell phone videos from the ground. At night, it's a little harder to capture images of things like this. Can somebody put their own drone up in the air just to capture some close video of these guys?
I suppose you could. People are trying all sorts of creative things to use, a high-powered camera lens to get their own drones up there. All of these things sound nice, but you realize quickly how big the night sky is, and these drones move real quick, really, really quick. So it's hard to keep up with them and really track them. Again, but Vince, keep in mind, we're doing this as, ordinary Americans. We don't have the type of military-grade equipment to track these things with any amount of specificity, really dialing into where these drones are going. That is what we have America's military for and law enforcement to track these things in a more meaningful way.
So do you have, it sounds to me like you're kind of just in the same position as all of your neighbors are, wondering what's going on. You're a New Jersey assemblyman. Is anyone answering your questions for you when you ask the state police or you ask the state government? Is anybody providing answers to you?
So for the longest time, Vince, we've been asking Governor Murphy and the State Department of Homeland Security to provide a briefing at a minimum for legislators. We've been making that request for over a week now. At long last, we do expect to have a briefing with the Department of Homeland Security and the governor tomorrow. So I hope that we'll have some answers. Frankly, I'm not very optimistic about it. But we will finally, at long last, hear from the governor and see what he has to say about this.
Yeah, and then the size of these things, we quoted the ABC report at the top. They said the size of small school buses. Can you, in your observations and your neighbors' observations, can you tell how big these things are?
They range. I mean, as far as I consider, the ones that I see most often appear to be maybe 6 feet across. I will say that I have not seen one that looked like the size of a school bus necessarily, but a smaller car, absolutely. These are large drones. These are not the type of thing you buy as a Christmas gift.
Right.
These are not recreational. These are not owned by residents of a town. This is something far more powerful. It's a large piece of equipment, and there's just so many of them, Vince. We're talking if there's a dozen over my neighborhood, what does that mean for the rest of the state of New Jersey? There must be hundreds of these things.
This is definitely, at least for the month, one of the craziest stories in the whole country. We have a lot of crazy stories, and I feel like it's not receiving as much. Even though like ABC did a report on it, it just is not receiving the attention and scrutiny it deserves. So I'm really grateful that you stopped by to talk about this, Mike in Ganamort. And hey, Corey, how did he do? Did he do okay?
I think he did really well, Vince. Almost as good as I would have if I was an assemblyman in New Jersey. Can I ask Mike, though, so the government's being so secretive about it, and they're saying, that's not a cause for concern and not to worry or anything. Are they just downplaying this? And if they are, do you think it actually is the federal government involved with these drones, or could this be a foreign actor? Who do you think is responsible for these?
Well, it's a great question. Again, we're operating with no information here. We have no way of knowing what's going on.
Yeah.
I think if nothing else, if the federal government or the governor or his administration at least told us who was operating the drones, that could, depending on his answer, provide some measure of comfort. I mean, if this is an American military operation for some national security purpose, I think most Americans would give them some amount of deference on this.
I just don't
need to know that.
I just don't get how you can fly a craft of this size without having any sort of markers or indication of where it's from. So, like every other type of vehicle like this in the United States has either lettering or licensing involved, right? So if you drive a car, you have a license plate. And you're going by license plate scanners on the highway constantly. Everyone knows where you are. The cops know where you are at any given moment. Your boat has, you literally register your boat. You have numbers on the side of it indicating your boat. If you fly an aircraft in the United States, I can go on FlightAware right now. I can track every flight in the country. How do we have fleets of drones without any distinguishing tracking or ownership that are the size of small vehicles? How does that happen?
You're asking all the right questions, and this is why people are so spooked. This is such an unnerving thing. I'm going to look up in the sky tonight and wonder what the heck is going on. So we're flying blind here, pun intended, and we're just looking for answers. We want to know what's going on. Are these the good guys or the bad guys, or something else entirely? We are well past the date when we deserve answers.
All right. It turns out the also great Mike in Ganamort from the Ganamort family, assemblyman up in New Jersey. Sir, thank you very much today for that update. Speaking of drones, Karine Jean-Pierre was just... Sorry, I couldn't resist. Karine Jean-Pierre was just asked, Karine, about whether or not Joe Biden has been briefed on the drone situation in the Northeast. Here's how she answered.
There have been repeated drone sightings in the Northeast, especially in New Jersey. These are not small drones, some of them pretty large. They're flying at low altitudes, they're flying in flocks. Has the president been briefed on this situation?
So we are certainly aware. The president is aware.
Is the president aware? What is the president aware of? Let's start with the short list.
Closely tracking the activity and coordinating closely with relevant agency, including DHS and FBI, to continue to investigate these incidents. Don't have anything beyond that to share. Obviously, this is something that DHS and FBI.
You do think if it was a government program, don't you think it's a little too obvious? You know? Like, wouldn't they do this in a more remote area, somewhere that's not quite so populated? But this whole thing stinks to high heaven.
Or tracking very, very closely, and so I would have to refer you to them directly, but aware, keeping an eye out, and looking into the incidents that you just mentioned.
Oh, keeping an eye out? Looking into? Like a drone? Has the government ruled out that foreign entities control these things?
Has the federal government ruled out that these are controlled by foreign entities?
Yeah.
And do you know if they're conducting surveillance over these areas?
I cannot make any kind of predictions or comments about that specifically from here. This is something that DHS is looking at and FBI, so I would have to refer you to them. I don't have anything beyond that. We're tracking this very closely. Obviously, we're all aware of the incidents that have been reported. I'm not going to go into what they could be or could not be.
Follow-up question. Why do you even do these useless press conferences? Hey, you're the spokeswoman for the White House, right? Uh-huh. Yeah, could you tell us what's going on in America? No, we have no information to share. Not at this time. The relevant agencies are all over it. She can't leave soon enough. Joining us next, Congresswoman Ashley Hinson will be here. She had some questions for D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser today, who's not doing a great job. Details ahead. Hey, good afternoon to you. 4:35 here at News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up top of the hour, Bobby Burak is here from Outkick. We'll talk about the left defending the assassin. Longing for him, even. They're out of control. Bobby will tell us all about it at 5 o'clock. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The leadership in Washington, D.C. hasn't exactly been fantastic, to say the least. Remember back in 2023 when D.C. Council Chairman Phil Mendelson claimed that there is no crime crisis at all in the nation's capital?
I know this belies the common belief, and when it comes to crime, how people feel is important. But there is not a crime crisis in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, that's what happens when you don't arrest criminals. You can fudge the numbers. And today, Phil Mendelson, as well as the D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, appeared in a House Appropriations Committee hearing to assess their budget for the coming fiscal year. And here's an exchange between Congresswoman Ashley Hinson and D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser about crime in the district.
But I think realistically, enabling rhetoric that was unacceptable and anti-police and soft on crime for several years did lead to an increase in crime in the city. And while I'm glad to hear that you are trying to reverse that trend, and people are coming here, that fear still exists. And when you hear 274 homicides in 2023, people they may have to come here for work and for other things, but they are still certainly afraid. So when you look at arrests that are happening, and you talk about some of these illegal guns that people have, how many of these people are repeat offenders, right? They're being signaled to that they're not going to be held accountable for, whether it's lack of arrests or prosecutions. That's both probably a part of the conversation, but how many people are repeat offenders?
We think that there are a small number of people who are responsible for most crimes. We do think that. We think that people who use guns will tend to use them again. And we look to make sure the ecosystem is working.
A small number of people are responsible for most of the crimes. What does that tell you? Well, it tells you that the criminals keep getting away with it because there aren't meaningful consequences to prevent them. the Congresswoman continued on that front and said, well, what does that imply for our police?
Well, and I certainly think when you think about the message that it sends to police and recruiting police and getting more people into the force, and thanks to the chief for being here today, we want to make sure that those who are arrested are actually prosecuted, because it's tough to be a cop out on the street, putting your life on the line every single day, and then realizing that these people are walking anyway. So
Well,
I think
I
that's
couldn't
a huge
agree with
fear.
you more on that point.
She agrees. She agrees that it's all awful right now. Joining us now is Congresswoman Ashley Hinson from Iowa's 2nd Congressional District. Good to have you with us, Congresswoman.
Thank you for having me on. It was a pretty spicy hearing earlier today.
It seems maddening to sit there and ask D.C. officials, like, hey, why aren't there all these consequences for criminals? And they sit there and they say, I agree with you.
Right, and that's the message that Iowans have clearly, it resonated with my constituents over the last election cycle. They want to see Washington, D.C. look more like Iowa, not the other way around. And what we've seen out of Mayor Bowser over the last 10 years, and while I appreciate that she came before the committee today, it's been 15 years since, the mayor's appeared before our FSGG subcommittee, but she's presided over the near total destruction of our nation's capital and safety here. I have to welcome Iowans to D.C. all the time. We've got middle school history classes. We've got families on spring break. We've got people coming out here to work and advocate, and Americans deserve to feel safe when they're in D.C. And what I told the mayor today was the soft on crime approach that prioritizes these criminals over other victims and prioritizes letting them off and not cracking down and any accountability here, it sends the wrong message to our constituents about their capital. And so that was the message that I tried to make very, very clear to the mayor today.
Well, over the course of the last few years, on her watch, under her tenure, the D.C. police strength had fallen to its lowest level in over half a century. And that is a really telling sign. You heard we heard you just a moment ago talking about the fact that we've had all this attrition. We've had fewer and fewer cops to actually even work the streets in D.C. Do you see that getting better in the year ahead?
Well, I certainly hope so, because the administration change will signal to the D.C. police force that, hey, we have your back. We are pro-law enforcement. We want a safe capital. But I think this speaks to these Democrat-run cities where they have embraced or not stood up to this rhetoric, right? I think some of it comes from the courage to be able to say, you know what, I don't agree with that. But they let it all slide because they were so worried about their progressive base. So
Yes.
Cities like New York, where you've got all of these illegal immigrants who are beating on police every single day. Here in D.C., you've got teenagers carjacking, even members of Congress getting carjacked in Navy Yard, right? I mean, so the message that sends to the rest of the country is soft on crime policies, soft on crime rhetoric, anti-police rhetoric leads to an increase in crime. A big duh from all of us here in Congress. So
Yes.
I think it's high time that they are accountable for this. I just wonder when D.C. residents are going to say enough's enough and vote these people out.
Well, quite a few D.C. residents have said enough is enough, and they've left the city. They voted with their feet. They got out of the city because they couldn't take it anymore. How long are we going to have 2 blocks of 16th Street painted with the words Black Lives Matter on them? Because I feel like that gesture that was paid for by D.C. taxpayers was at the height of a rampant increase in crime in the nation's capital. And the mayor really just indulged that rather than said, no, we're going to stop this criminality and we're going to help the people of D.C.
Right. Taxpayer money should be not on the hook for a Black Lives Matter plaza. They should be focusing on the violent crime in the city.
Yes.
And that's the one thing I told the mayor today. They touted that their violent crime and their murders are down. They're still unacceptably high. And that's the point here. We need to make the Capitol a better place to live and to visit. And for all those who have walked with their feet and have sent that message, I think that's a great message to send. We're seeing that out of liberal states like California. U-Haul makes, obviously the trailers, some of the aluminum components are made in my district. And they told me U-Haul is actually having to pay people to drive trailers back to California because so many people are fleeing and not going back. So I think you're probably seeing the same kind of trends in cities like this.
The chairman of the D.C. City Council, Phil Mendelson, also there today. He was involved. He was doing some finger pointing here, saying, well, the U.S. attorney, that's Matthew Graves for D.C., he's not prosecuting over 2/3 of arrests. Take a listen to Phil Mendelson today.
We are different than any other jurisdiction in that all of our felonies are prosecuted by the United States Attorney. And as of about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, the U.S. Attorney was declining to prosecute over 2/3 of the arrests that were presented to him. That's a significant problem, and that's why I spoke to more resources for the U.S. Attorney's Office. Our courts are backlogged because of the vacancies. That was an article in today's Post about that. That also impacts public safety in the district.
Wait a second. The D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office has spent all of its time and money prosecuting thousands of American citizens who voted for Donald Trump over the course of the past 4 years. They have more than enough resources to go after crime in the District of Columbia. And yet Phil Mendelson is saying the failure to prosecute was a, quote, lack of resources?
Yeah, it's just a priority of resources, and I think that's what that comes down to. And I do agree we should have the opportunity to haul them before us at some point, too. And I'm not sure if our Appropriations Committee is the right venue for that or which committee should do that oversight. But we do absolutely need to ask those questions. It's why we have been so concerned about the lawfare coming out of the DOJ. They have weaponized all of this against supporters of President Trump, and I think that couldn't be more clear. So I think they should all be accountable for this, whether it's, and I think police are trying to do their job. Again, I think there's been an uphill battle put in front of them because of the rhetoric and the policies out of cities like D.C. I do think our cops want to be out there enforcing the laws that we have all passed and keep our communities safe, which is their charge. But I do think it comes down to prosecutors need to prosecute, and we want to see these criminals who are forcing, you can't go to CVS and get toothpaste. It's all locked up because of all the theft. I mean, for everyday Americans, all that theft is creating so many challenges and it's making life so much harder. So I think every time we turn on the local news, we see another disturbing violent crime, people getting shot at, people getting carjacked. Enough's enough, and people should feel safe coming here and working here.
There are literally drugstores in D.C. where people are stealing the merchandise and then walking outside and selling it on the street in front of the store they just stole it from. And the city council is passing legislation to ban right turn on red? What? Talk about having your eye off the ball, Congresswoman.
Yeah, absolutely. Priorities. So what I will say to everybody listening is if you're looking for an out, Iowa's a great place to live, work, and raise a family. I would welcome you to my district. Iowa's 2nd Congressional District is a very, very beautiful place, and our stuff is not locked up when you go to a drugstore to buy your toothpaste.
It's so crazy. So what can be done? Obviously, you've got a Republican Congress coming in both House and Senate. You've got a Republican president coming into place. That's all well and good. What do you think should be done with Washington, D.C., Congresswoman Hinson? Is it time for the Congress to fully take it over again?
Yeah, I think that's a conversation we need to have here because this is about accountability. And trust me, I do understand home rule. I was a state representative. I understand federalism. I think all of those things are important. But when I look at this city in particular, it was never meant to be a state. Right. It was always meant to be just the seat of government, and that was it. And so that's where it should be. And I think maybe it's worth having that conversation. And certainly it would spark, I believe, a lot of these problems might fix themselves if we start putting that magnifying glass on D.C. again.
Yes, just make them nervous and force them to actually take care of the people of D.C. And that would be the result we all want. And yet that's not where we are right now. Congresswoman Ashley Hinson, thank you very much for posing those questions to the leadership in D.C. today and joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us, and we're not done.
No, we're not. I could tell. Congresswoman, thank you. All right, there's Congresswoman Ashley Hinson, a great advocate for Iowa. She gets the message. She knows how to handle it. You hear what she said about the U-Hauls? She goes, by the way, the aluminum is made, I think in her district, she said, the aluminum for the U-Hauls. Good for her. Good for her. But it is nuts, isn't it? There was a lot of nutty moments in that hearing today. I heard one congresswoman, she straight up said that she wears bulletproof vests when she goes to inaugurations. She's a Democrat. She's like, when I go to the inauguration, I wear a bulletproof vest. I'm like, okay, one, you kind of sound crazy when you say that. Two, what does that say about the leadership in D.C.? If you have to wear a bulletproof vest to be a no-name congresswoman sitting in the crowd at an inauguration, that's pretty third world, I would say. That's pretty third world. Phil Mendelson also had this to say about why he can't trust the residents of his own city with guns. Now, you have a Second Amendment right. I just need to remind you that you have a Second Amendment right to bear arms. Here's why Phil Mendelson thinks that D.C. residents can't handle the same responsibilities when it comes to gun ownership as, say, residents of Wyoming.
Most folks who have guns are law-abiding. They're people we don't have to worry about. But there are folks who are not law-abiding, and that's what we're trying to figure out how to deal with, which is why we have the regulations we have. And I totally get it that folks who are in Wyoming or Western Michigan grew up with guns, they understand guns, they know gun safety. Those are not people who live in urban jurisdictions.
Yeah, you urban people, you really don't even know what you're doing. You shouldn't have guns, says Phil Mendelson. What kind of rep is he? So he's supposed to be representing the people of his city, and he's like, well, people in other places are far more responsible than our residents. Holy cow. Ashley, more from Congresswoman Ashley Hinson today. She also was talking about federal workers and getting them back to work in person. She said, is the city ready to handle that?
Are you ready for that? I guess is the next question, because when you think about all, if those people are required on January 20th to show up to work, what's that change going to be like for the city?
Yes, we are ready. Yes, we are ready. And in fact, we have had that conversation with Metro. I think the biggest impact would be on our public transportation system. And unlike some places, Metro has leaned into frequency, leaned into more and optimized bus routes so that we are prepared to carry our workers, visitors, and residents.
Yeah, the work from home thing really has changed, D.C., whether you support it or not. It's just true that it's definitely changed. Just the amount of people who are present. It's a city that it's a city of offices. That's what Washington, D.C. is. Yes, there are people who live in the district, but the majority of the people who work in the district come from outside of it each day, or at least used to. And there was a Senate report that just came out a few days ago that showed only 6% of federal workers even show up in person on a full-time basis now. 6%, only 6%. Apparently all the different agencies have a wide variety of rules and regulations about this. The New York Post says this: they're being remotely professional. A paltry 6% of the federal workforce report in person on a full-time basis, while almost 1/3 of federal workers are remote on a full-time basis, in a sharp turnaround from the pre-pandemic era in which only 3% teleworked daily. Joni Ernst, that's whose office is responsible for the report, she's long crusaded against the rise in remote federal work. She's planning to reveal the fruits of her office's year-and-a-half inquiry to DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. The nation's capital is a ghost town with government buildings averaging an occupancy rate of 12%, Ernst wrote in the blistering report. If federal employees can't be found at their desks, exactly where are they? She asked. Elon Musk responded to this. He said, quote, if you exclude security guards and maintenance personnel, the number of government workers who show up in person for 40 hours of work a week is close to 1%. So if you get rid of the security guards and maintenance personnel, it's hard to be a remote security guard. It's very difficult to secure a building from a distance. You kind of have to be there. And maintenance personnel, you kind of have to be there. If you exclude them, it's 1%? Almost no one, he writes. Yeah. So are you ready for federal workers to return? Muriel Bowser says yes. Those of you who are stuck in traffic say no. All right. Let's see. I've got Billy calling in from La Plata now on line 1. Billy wants to weigh in on all these drones flying over the northeast United States. Hello, Billy.
Hi, Vince. Pleasure to talk to you.
Hey, Billy. Yeah.
Well, I figure if Joe Biden is unwilling, or the government is unwilling to use their vast technological skill and knowledge to jam whatever is controlling these drones, if we could give them a redirect down here to southern Maryland, we could test their ballistic resistance.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Find out.
Kind of like sport.
Yeah, I had somebody post they already got their buck this year. They'd like to see if they can take down a bus-sized drone. Do you need to get tags for drones?
I don't know what the altitude is, but it sure would be fun.
Yeah, it would be fun, wouldn't it? That'd be great. Deputize a bunch of Americans, get them out there. You know how every so often we have to call the deer, right? The cops get up in the deer stands and they take them out. Maybe it's time for American citizens, a well-regulated militia, to take down these drones. I like the idea, Billy. Let's see what happens. If they won't do it in Jersey, where's Tony Soprano when you need him? Droney Soprano. They could be shooting these things out of the air. Hey, coming up on the program, Bobby Burak is going to be with us from Outkick. He talks to us about the left's love for assassins.
News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
A recent study showed that one of the top reasons people don't go to the dentist on a regular basis is due to dental fear. Well, I can relate to that because my experience with the dentist when I was a kid were not the most comfortable, and I had a big fear of the dentist. But for the past 7 years, I've been going to see Dr. Rob and Dr. Deb at Bethesda Sedation Dentistry. That fear and anxiety is gone. They're amazing dentists. They helped me overcome my dental fear, and honestly, it's been life-changing. Their approach with me was compassionate and non-judgmental. Everything's talked about in advance. It's all 100% permission-based. They proceed at the speed you're comfortable with. So trust me, if you have any dental fear at all and nagging tooth pain, if you're interested in sedation dentistry or just looking for a great dentist, call my dentist, Bethesda Sedation Dentistry, 301-530-2434. That's 301-530-2434, or visit BethesdaSedationDentistry.com. Bethesda Sedation Dentistry. Sleep, dream, smile.
We all hear the radio ads about the IRS. They tell you to be afraid, to be scared, and they try to frighten you into calling. I'm not here to do that. Tax Relief Advocates is different. TRA is here to tell you that if you owe money to the IRS, whether it's $5,000, $50,000, or $500,000, we have a solution. It doesn't matter if you're sitting in your car, at work, or with your kids. No matter where you are, call now. 800-575-4954. Don't lose hope. TRA can eliminate or reduce what you owe